We're at the doorway to the Martin Guitar Museum in Nazareth, PA, and Mike Dickinson's going to take us on the tour. Lead the way, Mike. We're inside the Martin Guitar Museum here in Nazareth, PA, back with our helpful host today, Mike Dickinson. Mike, I'll just bat the ball to you and take it away.
So years ago, Chris Martin was like, all right, we need to tell the story. So the story starts in a little town called Markneukirchen, Germany, where CF is growing up. His family are instrument builders, violins, cellos, some are cabinet makers, and he hears about this wild new instrument out there called the guitar, and he goes, I want to build a guitar. So he goes to all the local violin makers and he's like, hey, teach me how to build guitars. And they go, what's a guitar? Guitars aren't musical instruments. Go build the cabinet with your father, go work with your uncle to build the violin, all this sort of stuff. And then finally he hears about this guy in Austria named Johann Stauffer, who's set up a factory to go build guitars. And that's where the story starts. At 15 years old, he hops in a stagecoach, takes a 3-day ride to go, hopefully go get a job and work for Mr. Stauffer. And that's where our museum starts. So Stauffer is building these light, airy guitars, mostly called parlor guitars, because it wasn't necessarily considered a female instrument, but it was a parlor. So you and a few friends sitting around the living room. There weren't big bandstands like today, and if they were large orchestras, right? So he's building these little instruments, gut strings. The necks have keys in them, so you can move the neck back and forth this way. And he works for Stauffer for a while and ends up becoming the company foreman, and then he quits. Well, he quits to go work for another guitar company called Cool Guitars. And we find out the reason he goes to work for Cool Guitars is because Mr. Cool has a daughter. And after months of wooing, oddly, they get married and they head back to Markneukirchen, Germany in order to start CF Martin Guitar Maker. So he gets back to Germany, puts his little placard outside that says CF Martin Maker of Guitars, and instantly gets harassed by the violin makers going, hey, you can't build guitars in this town unless you apprentice with us. And he goes, well, like I asked, you said no. We don't care. You go build cabinets with your father. You cannot build musical instruments in this town. Because it was a guild system. You had to work your way through up apprenticeship programs and stuff like that. And he battled that for like 5 or 6 years, and then he just gets tired of it. So he looks at his wife, and he now has a baby, and he goes, there's this place called America, and our friend Henry is over there, and he has a place ready to go if we want to move. So they get on a boat, sail across the sea, and end up in New York City. Yep, 1833. So he's living in what would be considered, I believe, 5 Points now. It's where his was like is now the exit of the Holland Tunnel. And he's making these Stauffer-esque looking guitar. He's still writing to his friends back home to get inlay pieces and parts and stuff. But you just have to imagine at this point, like, other people from other worlds are seeing this and going, well, that looks like a guitar but in my country we do this different. And you see different body shapes and different headstock shapes and different bridge styles. You can just imagine customers are coming in and drawing for him. Well, this is what a guitar looks like in my country. Can you make me a guitar that looks like that? Metal bridges and then combining old world stuff for headstocks with new bridges and new body shapes. And he also had a full-time repair crew. One of his relatives was in the back making violins, and he had a full-fledged music store. So if you wanted a tuba, you could buy a tuba, or if you needed a violin string, you could buy a violin string. As a matter of fact, there's a record somewhere where he traded a box of wine for violin strings at one point. The problem with New York City is he would occasionally come down into this area because his friend Henry, who helped him get to New York, had finally moved into this area. And they'd come down on vacation to see him. And at the end of one of those vacations, Mrs. Martin looked at Mr. Martin and said, "Honey, I love you, but I can't take city life anymore. Where Henry lives looks like Germany. They speak German there." And him being a smart man, sold the store, packed up everything, and moved to Cherry Hill, Pennsylvania. Now, Cherry Hill is literally like 3 blocks from where we are right now. And he was smart. At the top of Cherry Hill, there was the stagecoach. He moved across the street from the stagecoach. So now if you look at the map of the East Coast of the US, you have to go Boston, New York, and to get to the next major city, Philadelphia, the stagecoach would run through Cherry Hill, Pennsylvania. So you imagine you're a touring musician of the day. You've done Boston, you've done New York, and now you're heading to Philadelphia on the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. The stagecoach pulls in. You look across the street and you see a music sign and a guitar. You check into the hotel, run across the street, and go hang out with Mr. Martin. He had lots and lots of friends who were major touring musicians of the day, including one of them is Madame de Gonay. Now in this time, because he had moved from Europe to the US, he had to tighten up his guitars a little bit more bracing, little thicker woods here and there. So he started experimenting with bracing, and he developed what we call today the X-brace. And the first person he let play that was a Madame de Gonay. She toured from Cherry Hill to Texas and back, singing the praises of Mr. Martin and his brand new bracing style.
That's what started the tone.
That's what started bracing in that particular manner. She just loved the tone that X produced. Before that, it was basically a classical or nylon where there were just 4 individual braces, 4 or 5. They called them fans that would go down the top until he introduced the X. Yes. His next move was to Nazareth proper. So Nazareth was a cloistered community. If you were not part of the Moravian church, you were not allowed to live in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. But he would come in to do his business, and he had to be out by nightfall. Eventually he joined the church. His wife was a harp player for the church, and he was allowed to build a house. His house is still standing, his son's house is still standing, and he built a little factory behind his house where him and his son could build guitars. It's also where they started developing their own style. So today we have D28 and D18 and D45. Back then, that meant the body shape and the price of the guitar. So you paid $18 for a style 18 guitar, you paid $28. Then as the price of parts went up, that just became style. So if you have an 18, it would be mahogany back and sides, certain bindings and inlays. If you had a 28, it was certain bindings and inlays, certain body size. And that's where he developed the D8, what eventually became the D18, the D28, the D45, the 0028, the Ohm 28. And you see him also starting, as guitars are now moving out of people's parlors and into stages, so the guitars actually get a little bit bigger now. We go from what we call today, we call it a size 2, which is a fairly narrow guitar, to like O's and double O's, which are for the day were the biggest guitars.
No pick guards.
No pick guards, because at this point there was no steel strings and people were still mostly playing fingerstyle. There were not really a lot of plectrum players. It's not until the 1930s where plectrums come into play, or picks as we call them today, that we needed the necessity for a pick guard.
Interesting the contrast walking out of the mechanized factory back 150 years ago.
Yeah.
To how it started all by hand.
Yes. And on the picture, this is steps he had going from his house into the factory, including having to crawl through a window. But it just started as this part of the building, and then from here he added on and into his barn, and then even back a little bit further, which we'll see in a little while. And in the late 1880s, him and his nephew incorporated, so we became C.F. Martin and Company. But this was your average looking workbench back in the day. And these are cool because you say some of the people that know for rock and roll is Les Paul started playing on a Martin. Leo Fender started playing on a Martin. So, yes. Okay, let's move back. Say that again.
And we see a zither.
So a zither. So there was the Philadelphia School of Music, or College of Music. There was a professor that we made just a limited amount of zithers for. We didn't know this. There's really not much in our history about us making zithers, except for one letter that is to Mr. C.F. Martin, maker of guitars, but not zithers. And in that letter, the professor from Philadelphia gives him lists of why he should continue making zithers for him and his students. We didn't. We moved on from that because right about that time, and as we moved to the next area,
Martin also made mandolins.
yeah. So one of the reasons we wouldn't make zithers anymore is as the next wave of immigrants came over from Europe, they brought with them these fancy-looking things called mandolins. And C.F. Martin Jr. And the third at that at that time, basically, C.F. Martin and his now grandson, who was the first American-born Martin, we had been working with a friend of Grandpa's to do all of our distribution, and he was importing mandolins, and he said, no, you can't make them. And that made Mr. Martin of the day go, really? So he decided to get a couple mandolins and figure out how to build them. And yeah, we started making mandolins in the 1880s into the early 1900s. And I believe we continued making them up until like 1990. But yeah, and you can see they were highly decorative, pearl inlays all over the place. And right about this time, you also see that pearl inlay starting to slowly leach over into the guitars. And we see guitars that become a lot more, well, they have a lot more shiny, pretty things on them. In between the two, the World's Fair in San Francisco hits and the ukulele takes off. At one point, we were making more ukuleles than we were making guitars. There's a letter where Mr. Martin of the day jokes, yeah, we should be C.F. Martin and Company, ukuleles and guitars. Yeah. One of the most famous guitars is what we call the Contour uke. So it's not a special design or anything, but Richard Contour, who was part of Admiral Byrd's, snuck that in his hat. That and a harmonica on the trip to discover the North Pole. And if you would like, we can get a close-up. It's signed by presidents and politicians and celebrities of that day, because after the trip they did this like cross-country tour and he had all the famous people sign it.
So it looks like you continue to add to the collection. I see a tag that says new acquisition.
Yeah, when we find a new instrument, that was There you go. 1890s guitar, but like nothing else we built. So somebody drew that on a piece of paper, sent it into CF Martin, and we built it for him. As compared to most guitars, the bottom bout and the top bout are exactly the same size, and it's got inlaid silver around the rosette, where we were doing wood and plastic. And then next to it was our high-end guitar, what we call a style 45, which is pearl on the pickguard, on the fingerboard, and on the headstock.
Ended up in the extensive collection of actor Richard Gere,
Yes.
who offered it in his 2011 Christie sale in support of Tibetan charities.
Yes. We also bought a D28 at the same auction.
And I think G.E. Smith was Gere's guitar advisor for that sale.
Yes.
And G.E. Smith's from Eastern Pennsylvania.
To help, because guitars were now, like I said, they were leaving the living rooms and the parlors, and there were guitar orchestras and mandolin orchestras, and part of that orchestra movement was also banjos. So we did try in the 1920s to join the banjo craze. We figured out nuts and bolts weren't for us, so we went back to guitars, and to make them louder again, we see going from what we call a double O into the triple O, which is the body size still used to this day. Probably the second most built dreadnought would be number 1, most built triple O would be number 2. And then this is a really cool instrument. So I don't know if you can get a really good close-up of this.
A lot of autographs in there.
But that is Babe Ruth. And this is Lou Gehrig.
Wow.
And that is all of the 27, 28
Murderers Row.
men. Yeah. They were forced to work for a politician, and when they were on tour, that politician would have all these famous people. He had all the 27, 28 Yankees sign it, and a bunch of other famous people.
Awesome. A lot of history.
Yeah.
Curious.
The picture of Babe Ruth holding us there, and that's the string.
Yeah. Governor Al Smith.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
We also, it was at that point we also started working with a company called Dickinson. Now Dickinson was like the shop everywhere store. You bought sheet music, piano, shirts, pants. I don't know if they did groceries. Their guitars, while we were building them, always had a little different shape. It was more pear-shaped. Like this is what they called their double O or their 2-2, and you can see versus our double O, like the guitar was just holding. It's a little wider and flatter, a little more pear-shaped.
and Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah, Jimmy Rogers had one of the first style 45 guitars in the triple O size, and he had the word thanks painted on the back. So at the end of his shows, he would flip his guitars over and say thanks, and then he gave it to a musician who gave it to a musician. So it's now circa 1930. The big band era, the banjo is dying, and the more guitars and mandolins are taking over. So we had a bunch of banjo players coming to us going, we need a guitar that's a little more like a banjo than it is a guitar. Good guitars, the neck to body joint without the 12th fret. So what we decided to do was to make the neck and body joint at the 14th fret. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes it from a slope shoulder to a square shoulder. Just to give you 2 or 3 more inches. Now today we have cutaways in the S-style body, which gives people more, but back then that was an innovation, and we called it the OM, or the orchestra model. No, wrong key. So I just like handing people that guitar, and then if you let me hold the microphone for a second, and then hold this guitar, and Mr. Cameraman, if you want to zoom in on his face where I go, hey, how does it feel to be holding $1 million worth of guitars?
And that's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
So yes, this is a pre-war OM45 Deluxe because it has the pickguard, and this is one of 91 pre-war D45s that we own.
All right, now I wore gloves. So now I'm starting to see pick guards.
Yes, steel, late 20s, we start getting into steel strings. And you could order guitars either way. You see pick guards. You also see bigger bodies, the dreadnought body. The Dickinson company I mentioned earlier designed a guitar called the 111 and the 222, which were their largest instruments. Unfortunately, they didn't make it out of the Great Depression, so we had this design and we were like, well, let's try something with it. So we tweaked it a little bit and we came up with what we called our dreadnought guitar. Dreadnought named after the famous battleship, which was the biggest at the time. And that's when, yes, we did D28s and D18s. And then Gene Autry contacts us and he wants a pearly guitar. So we made the very first pre-war Martin D45 for Gene Autry. We custom inlaid his name on the neck. And then, so at the same time, we were slowly going to 14 frets. Only the first like 6 or so were 12 frets, and then we went to 14 frets, neck to bodies, and we did a special guitar for Tex Fletcher. But these are what the most sought after guitars, which is like a pre-war D18, a pre-war D28, pre-war D45s. And then the war hits and we had to sort of shake things up at Martin Guitar again, because we had also just started doing, if you look behind you, archtop guitars. So as the war hit, one of the decisions we had to make is, do we stay in the archtop market, or do we just continue with flat tops? So the amount of wood and metal it took to make one archtop, we could make 3 acoustic guitars, so we stuck with the acoustics. Paul, that was his first real prototype guitar, and it's made on a Martin 00018. Before he went to the big hunks of solid wood. I said Elvis Presley, the Kingston Trio, Elizabeth Cotton, all the big folk and country artists of that time were all playing Martin guitars. Yep. As the late 50s came and electric guitars started becoming, we tried to enter into the electric guitar market by simply putting pickups into an acoustic guitar. Wasn't a great idea, but it...
Yeah, well, it worked for Nick Adams for a while.
Yes, it did.
The Red. Wow.
Also, like,
That's really historic.
40 years later, it worked for another artist as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, in the 50s and 60s, as electric guitars, well, let's turn the clock back a little bit. So it's 1964, the Martins come back from a trade show. And at that point, they go, well, if we don't take another order, we can build guitars for 3 years. We need a bigger building. And over at the North Street location, they just couldn't expand anymore. So basically what they did was they bought this land and they opened up the shop here in 1964. And it was opened up by Judy Collins, came in, played on the dock for all the things.
Yeah, the folk revival.
Yeah, the big folk revival. Now in this little room here is, so what we have here is basically what we call the Chris Martin collection. So this is just a bunch of guitars Chris built. A trapezoid guitar for a summer camp, a D28S. He's collected, and a lot of designed guitars, and a lot of the artifacts he has picked up in his travels around the world. So we start building guitars at this facility. In '79, we open up the custom shop so you can custom order. Electric guitars were still big. Our competition was a Les Paul and a Fender Strat. We tried some solid body guitars. Didn't work over. Chris Martin's father bought a basketball team and a string manufacturing and a banjo company and a drum company to be like an all-in-one music source. The string company's still around, the other things have gone their own way. And then it got a little bleak because if you could buy a keyboard, you didn't need a musical instrument, you had a keyboard. And you could hit a few buttons and you were an entire band. So eventually, as the business wavered and things slowed down, Frank Henry, Chris's father, left the company. His grandfather came back in and asked Chris to help join the family business, and they did. And they slowly, through the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, churned the business and kept the doors open, kept the people happy, and then things were moving along slowly. And then in 1992, a little-known guitar player called Eric Clapton was on a little-known TV show on a little-known network called MTV and did MTV Unplugged, and like overnight, people went, wait, you can play music without electronics? And things have been going up since. And this is a copy of the guitar we designed with Eric. It's a 0028, Eric Clapton. This particular one has a beautiful sunburst on it. And a year or two later, to add to that, another relatively unknown guitarist from Seattle named Kurt Cobain shows up on Martin guitar, with a Martin guitar on MTV Unplugged. He had one of those, it was called a D18E. But we found and bought this guitar which he called Grandpa. So he owned this guitar, he got it from a girlfriend, and then when he moved on to the next girlfriend, that girlfriend said, no, give it back to her, and he had to go out and he bought a D18E with the pickups in it that he actually played on MTV Unplugged. But this was the guitar he wrote all the original music on. He called it Grandpa. And what this whole MTV thing did was it like opened up the eyes, like, wow, and it gave rebirth to the Crosby, Stills, Nashes and Youngs, the Bob Dylan rebirth, Eric Clapton, of course, Johnny Cash made a comeback, and all these guys who had been playing acoustic guitars in the 60s and 70s, all of a sudden people went back and found them again. And because of that, we contacted a bunch of them, and we did limited special editions for Johnny Cash and Roseanne Cash and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Sting and Willie Nelson. Now Chris Martin, owner of the company, loves musical instruments, and he goes to auctions, or he'll call me and go, "Hey Mike, I see this, let's bid on it, or let's buy this." So we have some custom-made Martins that were made for other people. That was actually a very early custom from 1913. He saw this mandolin, he just saw, well, that's cool looking, a one-of-a-kind size 545, a double O, but it's got a homemade pickguard on it. Even guitars made by other companies, like the steel guitar made by an early version made by Rickenbacker. Yes. And speaking of history, this here is our 3 millionth serialized guitar. So that's a sycamore tree on the back. That's a sycamore log on the front with little diamonds to indicate specific histories, like when we came to Nazareth, when we moved to Cherry Hill, when they moved to Nazareth, World War I, World War II, the opening of this factory, the birth of several of the different Martins, inlaid in the lines on the guitar are gold. It's a palladium pickguard with rubies where the 3 different factories in Pennsylvania were. Yeah.
The mirror down below.
Yeah. Yes, it does. So we continued to do artist and signature models. We did John Lennon, a tribute to him. Then we started copying some of our pre-war guitars. We came out with the Authentic series. We copied the OM45 and the D28 we saw over there. We did some momentous occasions like the anniversary of the moon landing. Again, we worked with John Mayer some more. We had Paul Jr. from Paul Jr. Designs helped us design a guitar, and we designed a trike for him, so it was working together there. And then most recently is the double neck guitars. So it seems to be a Martin historical thing, where every time we went to a bigger body shape, the Martin in charge would go, "I bet you could put 2 necks on that thing." So that's what happened. We came up with what we deemed the grand jumbo shape. So that body shape. And Chris Martin was like, "Yeah, make that a double neck guitar." So we made it. John Mayer, who's been in here multiple times, said, "Hey, can I borrow that guitar for a tour?" And we went, "You can borrow it to play it, but we want it back." So he takes it, he does a couple gigs with it, and his friends now are calling us going, "Well, I need a double neck guitar just like John's." So we decided to actually start producing a double neck guitar about 2 years ago. So it was inspired by John Mayer off of his want and desires for a tour. Yes. And then if you step over there, we take a look. That was the 3 millionth guitar. This was the 2 millionth guitar. And actually out the length, more closer to York, is the one guy outside of Switzerland who still hand cuts clock gears, RGM watches. So he was on tour and he's like, "This is pretty cool." So we designed this guitar to make it look like you are in the clock, looking outwards. And you can see the clock face and all the gears that we put into the back. And then one more really special guitar over here. This is just a cool concept. This is the 2.5 millionth guitar. So 2.5 million. And as the face comes around, when C.F. Martin I pulled into New York Harbor in 1833, that was the star pattern. So when he looked up in the skies, that's what he saw as he was pulling into New York City in December of 1833. Yep. And then last but not least, we're celebrating Chris Martin's father, and some of his innovations and designs and acquisitions throughout the year, whether it was a jazz-style guitar, electronics in a guitar. He tried opening up a factory in Sweden. He brought in Goya instruments. We started the Sigma line. We started the Shenandoah line. He introduced, most famously, the three-piece back on the D35. That was it. And so that is sort of lightly summing up the life and times of Fred Martin, or Frank Martin, Chris's father. We're good? Yes.
Mike's brought us to the end of the trail here at Martin Guitar Museum, Nazareth, PA. We invite everybody to come see this historic factory and museum where memories are made every day. Thanks again. Great tour, Mike.
You're welcome.